Welcome to Night Stories, where shadows whisper, nightmares crawl, and every tale drags you deeper into the dark. If you dare to listen, leave the lights off and let the night begin. I still hear the sound of the helicopter blades even though they stopped hours ago. The memory of that chopping, rhythmic thud vibrates inside my skull like a heartbeat that doesn't belong to me. We were told this was a peacekeeping mission. Nothing hostile. Just a presence to calm a small village that had been reported as restless. I remember the briefing officer's voice, calm but clipped, insisting it was routine. Routine. That word doesn't mean anything to me anymore. We landed on the outskirts of the village just before nightfall, dust and grit whipping up into our eyes, the air heavy with that strange stillness that doesn't belong in places where people live. Villages usually smell like smoke from fires, food cooking, damp earth, the chatter of life. But here there was nothing. No smoke rising from chimneys, no footsteps, no children darting between houses. Just silence. A silence so thick it pressed against the skin, making my chest tighten as though the air itself had turned against me. I should have said something then. I should have told my sergeant that something was wrong, that the place wasn't empty by chance. But I kept quiet. We all did. We moved down the narrow dirt road into the center. The houses were still standing, but wrong in subtle ways. Doors half open, swaying gently, though there was no wind. Windows shattered from the inside out, glass glittering in the dirt like frost. An overturned cart lay in the middle of the road, one wheel still spinning faintly, as if it had just been abandoned. Then there was the smell. Not the smell of death you expect, not rot or blood. It was sweet, cloying, like meat cooked too long until it turns black. It made the back of my throat itch. One of the guys gagged into his sleeve, muttering something about animals left behind. But we hadn't seen so much as a chicken. The first house we checked was small, with a thatched roof and walls darkened by smoke. We filed in, rifles up, lights sweeping across the room. The furniture was still there, a table set for dinner with bowls of food untouched. The stew was congealed, covered in a gray film. But what froze me was the chairs. They weren't tucked under the table or pushed aside. They were all turned toward the far wall, lined up neatly like someone had been watching something. On the wall itself, black streaks ran down like oil, thick and glistening. But when the light hit it, it shimmered with a faint red sheen. One of the guys reached out and touched it before anyone could stop him. He jerked his hand back immediately, cursing. His skin was blistering where it had made contact, small bubbles rising, the flesh seared as though he'd touched a hot stove. But the substance on the wall wasn't hot. It was cold. We pulled out fast, but not fast enough. As we crossed the threshold back outside, I swear I heard movement upstairs. Slow dragging footsteps. We had cleared the house. We had cleared every corner. Still, the sound followed us out, step after step, until the door slammed behind us with such force the frame splintered. We should have left then. We should have gotten on the radio, called for evac, burned the place to the ground. But orders are orders, and we had none to leave. The next building was bigger, what looked like a gathering hall. The double doors had been nailed shut from the outside, heavy beams hammered across them. It took two of us to pry them open. I remember the sergeant muttering under his breath. Something about why anyone would lock people out of their own meeting place. The answer came as soon as the doors swung wide. The air rolled out heavy and wet, like the inside of a slaughterhouse. My light cut through the dark, and I wished it hadn't. The floor was covered in bodies, laid side by side, their hands folded on their chests as if they'd been arranged carefully. But their faces? Every single face was gone, not ripped away, not eaten. Smoothed over like the skin had melted and hardened into a blank mask. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Just flesh stretched tight and pale. I couldn't look away. My stomach twisted, but I couldn't look away. There must have been 50 of them. Maybe more, men, women, even children. All lined up, anonymous, faceless. One of the guys whispered a prayer under his breath. Another started shouting, panicked, demanding answers from no one. The sergeant tried to keep us steady. Told us not to touch anything, to stay sharp. But then the light at the far end of the hall flickered. Not our light, not a flashlight. A glow, faint and sickly green, pulsing like it came from something alive. It moved between the bodies, and as it passed, I saw the flesh of those faceless people twitch. Not a trick of the eyes, not nerves. Twitching, shifting, their fingers curling slightly against their chests rising like shallow breaths. We backed out, weapons raised, but the glow kept coming. It stopped just at the line of light from the doorway, hovering there, writhing like smoke but thicker, heavier, like something liquid trying to remember how to be solid. That's when we heard the whispering. It wasn't in the air, it was inside my head. Words I didn't understand, not in any language I knew, but they bled meaning straight into my skull. Promises of peace, promises of silence, promises of becoming part of something endless. One of the guys screamed and opened fire. The rounds tore into the hall, spraying wood, punching holes in the blank bodies. But the glow didn't move. It only pulsed brighter, faster, and the faceless things began to sit up. One by one. We ran. Out the door, back into the street, breath ragged, weapons clutched so tight my knuckles split open. The sergeant was shouting orders, but nobody was listening. We just ran, and behind us, from inside the hall, I heard the sound of many feet hitting the floor at once in perfect unison. We split up into houses, trying to regroup, trying to make sense of anything. I ended up in what looked like a school. The chalkboard was covered in symbols, etched so deep the board had been nearly carved through. Circles within circles, lines slashed through them, spirals that seemed to move if I stared too long. And then the crying started. It was a child. High-pitched, broken sobs from somewhere inside the school. My body moved before my mind caught up. I kicked through door after door, lights slicing through the dark. Finally, in the last room, I saw her. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, sitting in the corner with her face buried in her knees. Her hair was tangled, her body shaking. I lowered my rifle, tried to speak softly, telling her she was safe, that we were here to help. She lifted her head. She had no face. Her head tilted as if she was studying me without eyes, and then her jaw split open where no mouth had been, tearing through the flesh in one long, wet rip. The scream that came out wasn't human. It wasn't even animal. It was the sound of metal grinding, of bone snapping, of 1,000 voices shrieking in chorus. I stumbled back, pulling the trigger without thinking, bullets tearing chunks from the walls, the floor, the desk. By the time I steadied my aim, she was gone. But the crying continued. It was in the walls now, in the ceiling, in the floor beneath my boots, everywhere. I don't remember leaving the school. I only remember bursting back into the street, gasping for air, and realizing most of the squad was gone. Only 3 of us left, eyes wild, faces pale, muttering prayers, curses, anything to drown out the sounds that seemed to crawl under our skin. We tried to radio in for evac. Nothing but static, though if I listened closely, I could almost make out words buried in the noise. Not words from command, not words from any living throat. Then the static stopped, and a voice came through clear. It said my name, and then it said, "Stay." I dropped the radio. It landed in the dirt with a dull thud, but the others didn't even notice. They were too busy watching the ends of the street where the shadows had begun to thicken. Not just darkness, but a shifting mass. Shapes moving inside it like animals pacing behind glass. The sergeant tried to keep us focused, tried to call out orders, but I could see it in his eyes. He was trembling, his jaw clenched so hard I thought his teeth might break. Whatever discipline the military had carved into us was peeling away in strips. We weren't soldiers anymore. We were prey. The first to die was Torres. He broke, just turned and bolted down the street, away from us, away from everything. He didn't get 10 steps before the shadows reached out. I saw it clearly. A hand, impossibly long fingers snapping out of the black, curling around his leg like a trap. He went down screaming, clawing at the dirt, boots kicking. We moved to help, but the ground under him opened like wet clay, sucking him under. His scream cut off so fast it was like his voice had been ripped from the air. When the shadows faded back, all that was left was a smear of blood in the dirt, stretched thin like it had been painted there with a brush. The sergeant forced us forward, shouting that we needed to regroup, that panic was death. But his words had no weight. Every building we passed seemed to breathe, wood shifting, glass rattling in its frames though the air was still. Windows stared at us like empty eyes. and I swore I saw faces in them. Not whole faces, half-formed, bubbling up from the inside of the glass, pressing outward like trapped insects. We found another building intact enough to barricade. It looked like some kind of store. Shelves overturned, jars shattered, dried goods scattered and rotting. We pushed the counter against the door and set up a defensive perimeter. For a while, we just sat in silence, the four of us left. That was when the sound started. At first, I thought it was rain on the roof. A faint tapping, irregular, soft. But then it grew louder. Tapping became scratching. Scratching became pounding. The walls began to shake under the force of it, dust raining from the ceiling. It was coming from every side, every angle, even beneath the floorboards. We raised our weapons, but there was nothing to shoot. The pounding stopped all at once, replaced by a new sound. Laughter. Not one laugh, not two. Hundreds, maybe thousands. High-pitched, low-pitched, childlike, ancient, male, female. Every kind of laugh you could imagine, all overlapping, all coming from the walls themselves. It got louder and louder until it drowned out thought, until my ears rang and blood trickled from my nose. Then as suddenly as it began, silence. I almost wished the laughter had stayed. Because what followed was worse. From the back of the store came a wet tearing sound, like fabric ripping, but thicker, heavier. I swung my rifle toward it just in time to see the wall split open. Not broken, not smashed, split, like skin being cut. The wooden boards peeled apart, strings of meat and sinew stretching between them, even though it was only supposed to be timber. And something crawled through. It wasn't a person. It wasn't even close. Its limbs were too long, bending wrong, joints bending both ways. Its skin was pale and slick, stretched tight over bones that jutted at impossible angles. Where its head should have been, there was only a blank dome of flesh, smooth and glistening. But what froze me, what turned my guts inside out, was the sound. It was still laughing. The same overlapping chorus we'd heard in the walls, but it was all coming from inside its body. The sound echoed through its chest, bubbling up from beneath its skin. Too many voices packed into one frame. The sergeant fired first. Rounds ripped into the thing, tearing holes that bled black. It didn't slow down. If anything, it moved faster, jerking forward in spasms like a puppet pulled on tangled strings. It hit him before I could react. I'll never forget that sound. The creature wrapped its limbs around him, and his body folded inward like paper. His spine cracked loud enough to shake my teeth, his scream twisting into a gurgle as his ribs collapsed into his chest. Then the thing pushed its hand, and if you could call it a hand, and into his mouth. Not down his throat, into his mouth. I saw the skin stretch, saw his jaw unhinge until it snapped, saw the thing's arm vanish inside him up to the elbow. The sergeant's body convulsed, eyes bulging, veins blackening in seconds. When the creature pulled back, it wasn't pulling out blood. It was pulling out light, a pale, glowing thread, writhing like smoke. The sergeant's body went limp instantly, his skin sagging, eyes caving inward. The light disappeared into the creature's chest, swallowed whole, and the voices inside it laughed even louder. The others opened fire, bullets sparking, blood spraying. But the thing only shifted, twisting its body to dodge with inhuman precision. One of the guys, Mason, charged it, screaming, knife drawn. He barely made it close before the thing's head split open. The flesh tore straight down the middle, opening like a flower, revealing nothing but rows of teeth. Too many teeth, spiraling inward endlessly. It closed on him in an instant. The sound of his scream stopped the second the teeth clamped down. His body was still twitching when it dropped him, half his torso gone, shredded like raw meat. I don't remember firing, but I know I did. I know because my rifle clicked empty and I was still pulling the trigger. The recoil was gone, the heat was gone, and I was just clicking into silence. That silence was when I realized we were down to two. Just me and Riley. He was shaking so badly his rifle clattered in his hands, his eyes darting everywhere but the thing in front of us. I grabbed him, pulled him toward the rear door. Somehow, by some miracle, it wasn't blocked. We shoved through, spilling into the night, running blind. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I only heard Riley's breath beside me, ragged and wet. But then it wasn't beside me anymore. His breath cut off mid-stride. I turned just in time to see his body hanging 3 feet above the ground, suspended by nothing. His arms were spread wide, legs kicking helplessly, and the air around him shimmered, like invisible hands were holding him there, stretching him out. His skin began to split, not cut, not torn, split, starting at his fingertips, lines running up his arms like cracks in porcelain. He screamed, begged me to help, but what could I do? His body was breaking open, his chest peeling apart, his jaw ripping down the middle. The scream never stopped. It only multiplied, echoing out of every new split in his flesh until there were dozens of voices pouring from his body. And then he was gone, not dropped, not torn apart, just gone, like the air itself had swallowed him whole. I was alone, completely alone. The village stretched out in front of me, buildings hunched like waiting predators, windows glowing faintly with that sick green light. The laughter had followed me, inside my skull, crawling down my spine. Every step I took forward, the ground seemed to pulse under my boots like I was walking on something alive. And then I heard it again. The radio, crisp, clear, like it was right next to my ear. It spoke my name again. Only this time it added something new. It said, "You are already one of us." The voice on the radio had said I was already one of them. I wanted to deny it, scream back into the static, but the truth was clawing at the back of my skull. My body was trembling in ways I couldn't control. My hands wouldn't stop twitching, and when I lifted my sleeve, I saw thin black lines spidering under my skin, veins I didn't recognize. They pulsed faintly, like they weren't carrying blood anymore. I staggered through the empty street, rifle clutched in my shaking hands even though it was dry. Every window I passed seemed to lean closer, frames creaking as if the buildings themselves were bending in to watch me. In the silence between each breath, I could hear whispering inside them. Not words, but the rhythm of words, as though the walls themselves were holding conversations I wasn't meant to understand. Then came the footsteps. Not mine. Behind me, measured, slow, deliberate, heavy enough to crunch the dirt but never rushing. I spun around, rifle raised, breath caught in my throat. Nothing. Just the empty street stretching back into the dark. When I turned forward again, the footsteps started once more. Closer this time. They weren't trying to catch me. They were hurting me. I don't know how long I ran, how many turns I took down streets that all looked the same. But eventually I stumbled into the center of the village, where a stone well sat at the heart of an open square. Around it were statues, maybe a dozen, standing in a circle. At first I thought they were carved from stone, but when my light swept across them, my stomach curdled. They weren't statues. They were people, bodies, hardened and twisted, their skin petrified into cracked gray husks. Their mouths were frozen open mid-scream, their hands reaching upward like they were begging the sky for help that never came. Their eyes were sunken pits, black and bottomless. The well in the center was sealed with a thick slab of wood, nailed in place with rusted iron spikes. Across the surface were symbols carved deep, circles, crosses, jagged spirals. Some were still wet, glistening faintly as if they'd been cut fresh. I didn't want to go near it, but my legs moved anyway, as though something was pulling me forward by invisible hooks lodged in my chest. Every step closer, the air grew heavier, thicker, until it felt like I was breathing through water. My ears popped, and a faint hum began to rise up from the well, vibrating in my bones. I crouched down, pressed my ear against the wood, and I heard them. Not whispers, not laughter. Voices, thousands of them moaning in unison, echoing up from whatever was beneath. Some were crying, some were begging, and some were singing in that same broken language I had heard before. My body froze. Every muscle locked. Because buried in that ocean of voices, I heard one I recognized. The sergeant. I jerked back, heart hammering, bile rising in my throat. The slab over the well was beginning to warp, the wood bending outward as though something was pushing up from below. The nails squealed in their sockets, vibrating, threatening to tear free. And then I saw them. Shapes moving at the edge of the square, dozens of them slipping between the buildings. Too tall, too thin, their movements jerky and wrong. Their blank heads turned toward me, and though they had no eyes, I felt their focus burn through me like a brand. I ran. I tore through the square, past the statues, past the sealed well, into the nearest alley. My boots hammered the dirt, lungs burning, every shadow shifting in the corners of my vision. The laughter came again, Not outside, but inside, rattling my skull. It drowned out thought, replaced it with static and flashes of memory that weren't mine. Children's hands clutching knives, families sitting in silence as black smoke bled from their mouths, villagers kneeling at the edge of the well as something unseen rose to meet them. I stumbled into another house, slamming the door shut behind me, chest heaving. The room was dark except for a lantern burning faintly in the corner. For a moment, I thought I was safe. Then I saw the walls. Every inch of them was covered in carvings, not painted, carved. Deep gouges that had stripped the wood to splinters. Faces, hundreds of them, etched with meticulous detail. Eyes wide, mouths open, screaming. They were so realistic I swore they were watching me. Some of the mouths still dripped with wet resin, glistening in the lantern light, and then one of them blinked. I backed away, heart slamming against my ribs as more of them began to twitch. Wooden eyelids fluttering, lips trembling, jaws shifting as if they were trying to speak. Then the sound came, low at first, then swelling. Hundreds of muffled voices gasping for air, pushing through the walls, suffocating me in their chorus. I fired at them without thinking, bullets tearing splinters, holes punching through screaming faces. But the sound didn't stop. It grew louder, vibrating the boards, shaking the lantern from its hook. The flame died when it hit the floor, plunging the room into blackness. I staggered out, back into the night, back into the labyrinth of streets. The footsteps had returned, always behind me, always the same distance away. I didn't know where I was running until I saw it, the church. It stood at the far end of the village, tall and jagged against the starless sky. Its steeple leaned to one side as if it had tried to pull itself away from the earth. The front doors hung open, one ripped from its hinges. A cross above the entrance had been inverted, not carved but bent, as though the metal itself had twisted under some impossible pressure. I forced myself inside. The pews were overturned, the altar smashed to rubble. But what drew me forward wasn't the destruction. It was what hung from the ceiling. Bodies, dozens of them, suspended by ropes tied around their wrists and ankles. Their chests had been cut open, rib cages spread wide, their organs removed. Candles were placed inside their hollowed torsos, burning with a sickly green flame. The wax dripped down their bodies, mixing with whatever fluids hadn't yet dried, puddling on the floor in thick, dark pools. Their faces were intact, too intact. Their eyes rolled in their sockets, their lips trembled, their heads turned slightly toward me as I stepped inside. They were still alive, still aware. Their mouths opened in unison, and that same chorus of voices flooded out, speaking words I couldn't understand. Yet my mind twisted to give them meaning. "You are the offering." I staggered backward, ears ringing, vision blurring. The green flames flared higher, casting shadows that writhed like living things. I turned to run, but the doors slammed shut, the sound echoing like thunder. The footsteps were inside now, closer than ever. Something moved in the aisles between the pews. A long shape dragging its limbs, head scraping against the ceiling. The voices from the bodies grew louder, chanting, their screams blending into a hymn. I raised my empty rifle like it would do anything, my breath caught in my throat. And then I saw it. Not a creature, not a soldier, something in between. It wore parts of a uniform, boots, a vest, a helmet split down the middle, but its body was stretched, torn, fused with pale, writhing flesh that wasn't human. Its face was gone, smooth and blank, but on its chest, stretching the skin like something pressing against a curtain, I saw mouths, dozens of them. And one of them was the sergeant's. It opened and screamed my name. The mouth on the thing's chest screamed my name again, louder, splitting through the chants that rattled the rafters. I froze, my legs locked in place, my mind tearing itself in two. Part of me wanted to run, to smash through the door and claw my way out of the village. But the other part, the darker part, was rooted to the floor, listening. Because I recognized more voices now, not just the sergeant, the others, Mason, Riley, Torres, all of them. Their mouths moved beneath the pale, stretched skin of that thing's chest, shifting under its flesh like rats burrowing in sacks. Their voices were screaming, sobbing, calling for help, begging me not to let it take me too. The creature staggered forward, its limbs jerking in broken marionette motions, every step cracking the wood beneath it. My light flickered across its face, still blank, still smooth, but twitching, rippling as though something underneath was pressing against it, trying to break free. The bodies hanging from the ceiling began to sway, not from wind, not from motion. They swayed in rhythm, all together, back and forth like pendulums, their hollow torsos glowing brighter as the candles inside them flared, dripping wax and blood together into the pools on the floor. The chanting grew unbearable, words tearing into my skull like nails. Become, become, become. I ran. Not to the door, it was sealed shut, boards across it that hadn't been there when I entered, but down the side of the altar, through a collapsed archway that led deeper into the church. The thing followed, its footsteps slamming like hammers, the voices in its chest shrieking my name over and over until it was all I could hear. The hallway beyond was narrow. The plaster walls split with cracks, oozing black fluid that dripped onto my boots. Each droplet sizzled, burning through the leather, through the flesh beneath. I bit down on a scream and pushed forward, deeper, deeper, the air growing hotter and heavier until I felt like I was inhaling ash. I stumbled into a chamber beneath the church, a crypt. The air was thick with rot, but it wasn't the kind of rot I knew. It was sweet, syrupy, cloying, like spoiled fruit. My light swept the room and my breath froze. Coffins, dozens of them, but none were closed. Their lids had been pried off and discarded. Inside each lay bodies, or what used to be bodies. Flesh shriveled, bone warped, mouths stretched open in silent screams. And on their foreheads, carved deep, was the same symbol I had seen on the well. Circles within circles, spirals that seemed to move if I stared too long. And then the whispers came, not from the bodies, from inside my head. Clearer now than ever before, layered and insistent, yet calm, almost soothing. You are not prey, you are not lost, you are chosen. I clutched my head, teeth grinding, nails digging into my scalp. The whispers painted images across my vision, villagers kneeling in this very crypt, their faces blank, their voices joined as one. They weren't afraid. They were worshipping. They had given themselves freely, an offering. The church wasn't a sanctuary, it was a womb. And I was inside it. The footsteps thundered down the hallway, closer, too close. I shoved deeper into the crypt, weaving between coffins until I reached the far end. A staircase spiraled downward, stone steps slick with something dark and wet. Against every instinct I had left, I descended. The stairs emptied into a cavern beneath the church. And there it was. The heart of it all. The walls of the cavern pulsed, not rock but flesh, veins bulging, fluids seeping. At the center, rising from the ground like a tumor, was a mound of bodies melted together. Dozens, maybe hundreds, fused into one grotesque mass. Faces stretched across its surface, screaming silently, arms reaching outward only to sink back into the hole. From its crown, a column of that same sickly green fire burned, casting the cavern in its glow. And the well. The bottom of the village well was here at the center of the mass, its stones cracked and warped, black liquid pouring from it into the flesh below. Every drop hissed. Every drop seemed alive, writhing like worms before melting into the hole. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My body wanted to collapse, to surrender, and for a moment I almost did. Then I saw him. The sergeant. His face was there, pressed into the mound, eyes still alive, still rolling in their sockets. His mouth opened and closed, silently begging me, silently screaming. The others were there too. Riley, Mason, Torres, all of them. Their faces trapped in the shifting surface, dragged down again whenever they tried to break free. The whispers filled me again. They are eternal, they are peace, join them, join us. The ground shook. The thing from the church doorway was here now, descending the stairs behind me, its limbs scraping the walls, its chest writhing with mouths. I had nowhere left to go. I aimed my empty rifle at the mound of flesh, knowing it was useless, knowing it would do nothing. But I had to resist somehow. My finger clicked the trigger again and again, hollow and desperate. The mound responded. The faces began to scream. Not silent this time, but full, raw, piercing. Their voices crashed into me, rattling my bones, tearing into my ears until blood spilled down my neck. The green fire surged higher, blasting heat across the cavern, the flesh walls shivering with anticipation. The sergeant's face broke free for a moment, his eyes locking onto mine, and though his mouth was moving in 100 different ways, I swore I understood him. Kill me. Before I could react, the creature reached me. Its arm whipped out, slamming me to the ground, my ribs cracking under the force. My vision blurred, spots dancing across my eyes. The mouths in its chest pressed close, all screaming at once, all stretching toward me like leeches ready to feed. And then the mound answered. A new limb, massive and dripping, tore itself from the mass and lashed across the cavern. It struck the creature, ripping half its torso away in one blow. The mouths inside it shrieked as they were sucked into the mound, dragged screaming into eternity. The creature fell, twitching, its blank head collapsing into a puddle of flesh. But the mound had seen me now. Its faces turned in unison, every eye locking onto me, every mouth opening, and the whispers became one voice. You are ours. The ground split, tendrils of meat and bone lashing upward, wrapping around my legs, pulling me toward the well. I clawed at the stone, screamed, fired my useless rifle, but nothing mattered. I was being dragged into the center, into the black liquid spilling endlessly from below. And then I heard another voice. Not theirs, not mine. A voice from my radio buzzing faintly against my vest. A voice I shouldn't have heard anymore. It said, run, and the tendrils hesitated. The word clung to the inside of my skull like fire. Run. It wasn't one of theirs. It wasn't the chorus of whispers that had tried to seduce me since we landed. It was sharp, raw, jagged with static. It sounded human. It sounded alive. The tendrils hesitated, twitching in midair, shuddering like they were confused. I ripped my legs free, skin tearing where their hooks had begun to bite into me. I collapsed to the ground, ribs screaming, lungs full of ash. But I forced myself forward on my elbows, dragging my useless body across the stone. The mound shivered, its surface rippling, faces opening their mouths wide in silent screams. Then the sound came, deep, thunderous, vibrating the cavern walls. Not a roar, not words, the sound of hunger. The tendrils lashed again. I staggered to my feet, pain exploding in my chest, and sprinted for the staircase. The stone steps seemed to stretch endlessly upward, the green fire below searing the back of my neck, shadows reaching, stretching. Halfway up, the whispers returned. You cannot leave, you are already within us. Blood burst from my nose and ears, running hot across my face, but I kept climbing. My vision narrowed to a tunnel, the edges of the world eaten by blackness. Behind me, something huge was moving, dragging itself up the stairs. At the top, the church door was still sealed. Boards nailed across, thick, unyielding. My shoulder slammed against them again and again until my bones felt like they would split. Behind me, the creature, the mound's offspring, was pulling itself into the hall. Arms breaking pews, mouths shrieking. I raised my rifle one last time. It was empty. I knew it was empty, but I squeezed the trigger anyway. The shot rang out. I don't know how. I don't know if the rifle gave me one last gift or if something inside the mound let it happen, mocking me. But the round hit the boards and split them just enough. I threw my weight against them, and the door exploded outward into the night. I ran into the open square. The statues around the well seemed closer now, their mouths wider, their hands stretching farther upward as if they were trying to catch me. The slab over the well bulged, nails tearing loose, a sickly green light spilling from the cracks. The entire village was awake. Every house, every window, every wall trembled with movement. Shadows spilled out into the street like liquid smoke. Figures rose from the dirt, thin, faceless, their limbs bending backward as they crawled toward me. Their mouths opened and the chorus began again. Become, become, become. I fired blindly. Empty clicks in the night. I screamed, voice cracking, throat torn raw, and sprinted for the only place that wasn't glowing, wasn't trembling. The tree line beyond the huts. The earth beneath me buckled. Hands, dozens of them, shot up from the dirt, clutching at my boots, my ankles, clawing flesh from my legs. I tore free, skin shredding, blood spraying across the ground. Every step was agony, but the forest was there, just yards away. Behind me, the well split wide open. The sound that came out wasn't sound at all. It was everything at once. Laughter, screams, hymns, sobs, static. It ripped through the sky, rattling my teeth until they cracked, shaking my vision until the stars bled across the black. A column of green fire erupted, higher than the trees, higher than the clouds, carrying with it shapes. Thousands of shapes, writhing, faceless, twisting in the light before vanishing into the night. One of them turned toward me as it passed overhead. It wore my face. I hit the tree line and didn't stop. Branches whipped across my arms, my chest tearing me open. Roots caught my boots, dragging me down again and again, but I crawled, clawed, staggered forward. Behind me, the voices followed, closer every second, screaming my name, screaming for me to stop, to kneel, to let go. I kept running until the voices began to fade, swallowed by the sound of rotors. The helicopter. I burst from the tree line into an open clearing. My legs gave out, my body collapsing in the dirt. But the light from above cut through the dark, a searchlight sweeping across me. I waved my arms weakly, screamed until my throat bled, but no sound came out anymore. Just blood. They saw me, they landed. I don't remember being pulled in. I don't remember the liftoff. I only remember lying on the cold floor of the chopper, staring at the ceiling, my body convulsing, my skin burning from the inside out. I could still hear them faintly in the static of my own skull, whispering, promising, waiting. When they asked me what happened, I couldn't speak. I still can't. I was the only one who came back. But I'm not alone, not anymore. At night, when the lights go out and the silence falls, I hear them breathing with me. I feel them moving beneath my skin, waiting for the right moment to open me up and let them through. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear the radio again. It doesn't tell me to run anymore. It says, bring us more. Thank you for listening. Hope you didn't get too scared. If you want to listen more stories, check out my channel. Please leave a like and subscribe. It means the whole world to me.